When my daughter Emily stood in my living room and told me I was too embarrassing to attend her wedding, I felt something inside me break. Not my heart, though that had shattered plenty of times before. No, this was different. This was the sound of a mother's patience finally snapping after 32 years of bending, sacrificing, and forgiving. What I did next would make headlines in our town, cost my daughter her perfect fairy tale, and teach her a lesson about respect that no amount of money could buy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before that day and who I became after. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 63 years old. For most of my life, I was the kind of woman who made herself small so others could shine. I was widowed at 45 when my husband David died in a car accident, leaving me to raise our 12-year-old daughter alone. David had been a successful architect, and his life insurance policy meant Emily and I would be comfortable, though not wealthy. I worked as a librarian, a job I loved because it was quiet and steady, and it allowed me to be home when Emily got out of school. I poured everything into raising Emily. Everything. Every penny I saved went into her college fund. Every weekend was spent driving her to dance lessons, piano recitals, debate tournaments. When she wanted to study abroad in Paris during her junior year, I took out a second mortgage on our house to make it happen. $28,000 for one semester, but I told myself it was an investment in her future. When she came back, she barely talked about the experience except to mention how provincial our town seems now, how unsophisticated her high school friends had become. I should have seen the signs then. Emily graduated summa cum laude from Cornell and immediately moved to Manhattan to work in fashion public relations. She made good money, but New York is expensive, so I helped with her rent for the first 3 years. $500 a month, every month, without fail. That's $18,000 if you're counting. I was counting, but not because I wanted it back. I counted because each payment felt like a little piece of my connection to her, proof that she still needed me. She visited maybe twice a year, Christmas and my birthday usually, sometimes just Christmas. The visits got shorter as she got more successful. 3 days became 2 days, became overnight stays where she spent most of the time on her phone, texting people I'd never met about parties I'd never attend. Then she met Harrison Whitmore III. Even his name had Roman numerals. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels along the East Coast. Old money, the kind that came with a summer house in the Hamptons and a cottage in Martha's Vineyard that had 12 bedrooms. Emily called me breathless with excitement the day he proposed. She was 29, and I was so happy for her because she sounded truly joyful for the first time in years. "Mom, it's a 3-carat diamond. Princess cut. It's perfect." She squealed into the phone. I tried to ask about Harrison, about whether he was kind, whether he made her laugh, but she just kept talking about the ring and the proposal at this exclusive restaurant where they had to know someone just to get a reservation. The wedding planning started immediately. Emily hired a wedding planner whose fee alone was more than my annual salary. She chose a venue at one of Harrison's family hotels in Newport, Rhode Island. Every detail had to be perfect, she said. This wasn't just a wedding. It was an event. The Whitmore family had standards. That's when the trouble started. Emily came to visit 3 months before the wedding. She breezed through my door wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than my car payment, her hair styled in loose waves that looked effortless but I knew required expensive salon maintenance. She looked beautiful, but there was something hard in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there and I just refused to see it. "Mom, we need to talk about the wedding," she said, not bothering with much small talk beyond asking if I'd lost weight. I hadn't, but Emily had this way of making observations that sounded like criticisms disguised as concern. I made her favorite tea, the lavender blend I always kept stocked for her visits, even though I never drink it myself. And we sat in the kitchen. My kitchen, with its old Formica counters and the wallpaper I'd been meaning to replace for 5 years. It had never bothered me before, but I saw it through Emily's eyes that day. Outdated, shabby, embarrassing. "I've been thinking about your role in the ceremony," Emily began, stirring her tea with the antique silver spoon that had been my grandmother's. "Obviously you're important, you're my mother, but Harrison's family is very particular about aesthetics and presentation."
I remember laughing because I thought she was joking. Aesthetics? Emily, it's a wedding, not a museum exhibit. Her face remained serious. Mom, do you know who's going to be there? Harrison's father just served on the board of the Met. His cousin is married to a state senator. There will be society photographers. The wedding is being featured in Martha Stewart Weddings magazine. That's wonderful, honey, I said, still not understanding where this was going. I'm so proud of you. I need you to understand how important this is, she continued, which is why I've hired a stylist to help you for the wedding, someone who can update your look. The word update hung in the air like a slap. Update my look? Mom, you're still wearing clothes from the 90s. That sweater you have on right now, you've had it since I was in middle school. And your hair? She gestured vaguely at my head. When was the last time you had it professionally colored? The gray is very aging. I touched my hair self-consciously. It was gray, yes, almost entirely silver now. I'd stopped dyeing it 2 years ago because it felt like a losing battle, and honestly, I'd thought it looked dignified, natural. David had always said he loved my hair. I made an appointment for you at this amazing salon in the city, Emily pressed on, pulling out her phone to show me pictures. They specialize in makeovers, and I've connected you with a personal shopper at Saks. She'll help you find something appropriate to wear. Mother of the bride dresses can be tricky, and we want to make sure you don't clash with the wedding party colors or, stand out in a bad way. Stand out in a bad way? I repeated slowly. At my own daughter's wedding? You know what I mean, Mom. Don't be difficult. She scrolled through more images on her phone. Oh, and I'll need you to lose about 15 pounds before the wedding. The stylist said the dress designs work better on a more slender frame. I found this great meal delivery service that can ship to you. It's only $200 a week. $200 a week. $800 a month. 3 months until the wedding. That was $2,400 for food that would arrive in tiny portions, teaching me that my body was wrong, that I needed to shrink myself even more than I already had. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, Emily, this is a lot. Can't I just wear something nice that I already own? I have that navy dress that navy dress is from Macy's. Macy's! She said it like I'd suggested showing up in a bathrobe. Do you understand that Harrison's mother is wearing Valentino? Her sisters are in custom Vera Wang. I can't have you standing next to them looking like someone's dowdy aunt from the suburbs. I am someone's mother from the suburbs. Your mother. Which is exactly why I'm trying to help you. Her voice rose in frustration. This is my wedding day, Mom, my one perfect day. Is it really so much to ask that you make an effort? After everything I've accomplished, after the life I've built, can't you just do this one thing for me? The manipulation was so smooth I almost didn't catch it. After everything she'd accomplished, as if her accomplishments existed in a vacuum, as if they weren't built on the foundation of my sacrifices, my second mortgage, my monthly checks, and the years of solo parenting after her father died. But I swallowed it all down. I swallowed it because that's what I'd been trained to do. Mothers are supposed to be selfless, accommodating, eternally understanding. So I agreed to the salon appointment. I agreed to meet with the personal shopper. I even agreed to try the meal delivery service, though I quietly canceled it after the first week because the portions were absurdly small, and I was teaching full-time at the library while also helping coordinate the community literacy program. The salon visit was humiliating. The stylist, a rail-thin woman named Svetlana, walked around me like I was a problem to be solved. She lifted sections of my hair with 2 fingers, her nose slightly wrinkled. "Very damaged," she declared in a thick accent. "Very dated. We do complete transformation, yes?" 4 hours later, I had short, platinum blonde hair that made me look like someone trying desperately to appear younger than her years. It cost $800. Emily paid for it, but the way she scrutinized the result made it clear I was supposed to be grateful. "It's very bold," she said finally, which I understood meant she hated it, but it would have to do. The personal shopper was no better. She pulled dress after dress, each in shades of beige and taupe, that washed me completely out. "Mother of the bride should be elegant but invisible," she explained. "You want to recede into the background. Let the bride shine." I found a dress I actually liked. A deep emerald green with elegant sleeves and a modest neckline. It made my eyes bright and gave me some color. The personal shopper physically steered me away from it. "Too attention-grabbing," she declared. "Think softer, more neutral." I ended up with a champagne-colored dress that cost $3,000 and made me look like an expensive ghost. Emily approved via FaceTime, barely glancing at the screen before saying, "Perfect, very appropriate," and hanging up to take another call. The weeks before the wedding became a parade of small humiliations. Emily would call with new instructions, practice walking in heels because I apparently clomped when I walked, get my teeth whitened because they looked dingy in photos, start using this special cream that would minimize the crepey skin on my neck and hands. I did all of it. Every single thing. I spent money I shouldn't have spent. I endured treatments that left me feeling worse about myself than I'd felt in years. And through it all, I told myself it would be worth it. That I would stand at my daughter's wedding and she would be happy, and maybe she would look at me with something like pride or appreciation. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emily called again. It was late, after 9 p.m., which was unusual. She typically scheduled our conversations during her commute or lunch break, fitting me in between meetings and networking events. "Mom, I have something difficult to tell you," she began, and my heart clenched with immediate fear. Was she sick? Was Harrison having second thoughts? Was something wrong with the wedding? "What is it, sweetheart? Whatever it is, we can handle it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said in a voice that was trying very hard to sound regretful, but couldn't quite hide the relief underneath, "Harrison's mother has requested that we expand the wedding party. Several of his cousins and family friends. The numbers are getting complicated." "Okay," I said slowly. "What does that mean for seating arrangements?" "It means we're running out of space. The venue can only accommodate 200 guests, and with the additions to Harrison's family list, we're already at 210. We need to make cuts." My stomach dropped. Cuts? I've been looking at the guest list, and honestly, a lot of your people are just, they're not going to fit the vibe, you know? Mrs. Patterson from the library, Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski from next door. They're sweet, but they're not really wedding caliber guests. This is a black tie event at a 5-star hotel, not a backyard barbecue. "Those people are my friends, Emily. They helped raise you. Mrs. Patterson gave you your first job shelving books. The Kowalskis watched you every day after school when I had to work late. I know, and that was great when I was a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore. I'm marrying into one of the most prominent families on the East Coast. Appearances matter. So my friends aren't good enough for your wedding. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mom. I'm trying to be practical. Actually, she paused, and I could hear her taking a breath, steeling herself for something. Actually, Harrison's mother had another thought about the whole situation. What situation? About you. About your role in the wedding. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. My role? Emily, I'm your mother. I know, and you'll always be my mother. But Constance, that's Harrison's mother, she pointed out that, well, she's hosting the wedding. Her family is paying for most of it. And traditionally, the host family should have a certain prominence in the ceremony. She thinks it might be simpler, more balanced if you attended as a guest rather than having a formal role. Attended as a guest? To my own daughter's wedding? You'd still be there. You'd still see everything. You just wouldn't be in the processional or seated in the front row or, featured in the ceremony. It would take so much pressure off you, actually. You could just relax and enjoy the day without worrying about all the ceremonial stuff. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely, and I sat there in my kitchen, holding the phone to my ear, listening to my daughter reframe my exclusion as a kindness. Mom? Are you there? I'm here. So you understand. You see why this makes sense. No, Emily. I don't understand. I don't understand how my daughter, the child I raised alone after your father died, the child I worked 2 jobs to support, the child whose college education I'm still paying off through my home equity line, can tell me I'm not important enough to have a role in your wedding. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds like you're telling me that Harrison's mother, a woman who's known you for less than 2 years, is more important than the woman who gave birth to you.
Don't be dramatic, Mom. This isn't about importance, it's about appropriateness. Constance knows how these events work. She's been to hundreds of society weddings. She understands protocol and tradition and what works photographically. Photographically, I repeated. Right. Because when you look back on your wedding photos in 20 years, you'll be so glad they had the right aesthetic and everyone receded into the background appropriately. I knew you'd react like this, Emily snapped, her fake sympathy evaporating. I knew you'd make it all about you instead of being happy for me. Do you have any idea how stressful wedding planning is? How many decisions I've had to make, and all you can do is criticize and make me feel guilty? I'm not making you feel guilty, Emily. Your own conscience is doing that. You know what? Forget it. Just forget the whole thing. If you're going to have this attitude, maybe it's better if you don't come at all. Maybe Harrison's mother is right that you're too... She stopped abruptly. To what, Emily? Finish the sentence. Silence on the other end. Then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Too embarrassing. The words hit me like a physical blow. Too embarrassing. My own daughter thought I was too embarrassing to attend her wedding day. Emily? She has to go. I have a tasting appointment. We'll talk later when you've calmed down. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, watching the numbers on the microwave clock change. 10 p.m. became 11, became midnight. I didn't move. I just sat there feeling something fundamental shift inside me. Too embarrassing. The woman who had raised her, sacrificed for her, loved her unconditionally for 32 years, was too embarrassing to be seen at her wedding day? I thought about all the times I'd made myself smaller for Emily's comfort. The salon visit that left me feeling like a cheap imitation of myself, the dress that cost $3,000 and looked like something worn by someone ashamed of her own existence, the meal plans and the teeth whitening and the creams for my crepey skin. I thought about the second mortgage on my house, the one I'd taken out so she could spend a semester drinking wine in Parisian cafes and calling her hometown provincial. I thought about the $18,000 in rent I'd paid, the money I'd sent for emergencies that always seemed to coincide with sample sales or weekend trips to the Hamptons with Harrison's friends. I thought about my friends, the ones who'd helped raise Emily, who'd been there for us when David died, who'd celebrated every one of her accomplishments like they were their own. Mrs. Patterson, who'd slipped Emily $20 bills just because throughout high school. The Kowalskis, who'd invited us to their family Christmas every year so we wouldn't be alone. All of them deemed not wedding caliber by my daughter. And I thought about Harrison's mother, Constance Whitmore, a woman I'd never even met who decided I should be erased from my own wedding day. Something in me that had been bending for 32 years finally snapped. I opened my laptop and started researching. I looked up the venue, the hotel where the wedding would be held. I read reviews, studied the layout, learned everything I could about the space and the event services they provided. Then I made some phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Janet Morrison, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd handled David's estate and had been gently suggesting for years that I needed to protect my assets better. It was 6 a.m. when I called her, but I knew she was an early riser. "Janet, it's Margaret Chen. I need to talk to you about something important." The second call was to my bank. I had questions about my home equity line of credit, about how it worked and what my options were. The third call was to Mrs. Patterson and the Kowalskis. "I need your help," I told them, "and I need to know if you're willing to trust me, even if what I'm planning seems a little crazy." Mrs. Patterson, who'd been a librarian for 40 years before retiring and didn't suffer fools gladly, laughed into the phone. "Margaret, I've been waiting for you to stand up to that girl for the last decade. What do you need?" Over the next week, I made a plan. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about teaching my daughter something she should have learned years ago, that people are not disposable, that love and respect must flow both ways, and that there are consequences when you treat others, especially your own mother, as embarrassments to be managed rather than human beings to be valued. Emily didn't call for 10 days after our fight. When she finally did, her voice was carefully neutral. "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe I was a little harsh. You can come to the wedding as a guest. You'll sit in the third row, and we'll make sure you're taken care of." The third row. Behind Harrison's family, behind his parents' friends, probably behind his father's business associates and his mother's book club.
"How generous," I said dryly. She either missed or ignored the sarcasm. "I'm glad you understand. I knew you would. You've always been so supportive." "Oh, I understand perfectly, Emily. Don't worry. I'll make sure your wedding day is absolutely unforgettable." "Great! I'll have the planner send you the final details. The ceremony starts at 4 p.m. Try to get there early so you're not scrambling to find your seat." After she hung up, I looked at the calendar. 1 week until the wedding. 7 days to finalize everything. I called Janet Morrison again. "I need you to draft something for me, and I need it to be completely legally sound." The day before the wedding, I drove to Newport. The 5-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think, to second-guess myself, to wonder if I was doing the right thing. But every time I wavered, I thought about Emily's voice saying, "Too embarrassing," and my resolve hardened. I checked into a modest bed and breakfast about a mile from the hotel. That evening, I went to the venue for the rehearsal dinner, which I'd been explicitly told I was not invited to. Just family and the wedding party, Emily had said, apparently forgetting that I was family. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot and watched the guests arrive. Harrison's family pulled up in a fleet of luxury vehicles. His mother, Constance, emerged from a black Mercedes wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was tall, blonde, surgically enhanced in that way that wealthy women often are. Not quite natural, but expensive enough to almost pass. Emily arrived with Harrison, and even from a distance I could see how she'd transformed herself into someone I barely recognized. Her laugh was different, louder, more performative. She touched Harrison's arm with a possessiveness that seemed rehearsed, like she was playing a role in a movie about the perfect society couple. I didn't recognize my daughter anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the plan, checking for flaws, wondering if I was being vindictive or justified. Around 3 a.m., I called Mrs. Patterson. "Margaret, you're doing the right thing," she said firmly. "That girl needs to learn that actions have consequences. And more importantly, you need to learn that you deserve respect, even from your own daughter, especially from your own daughter." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Perfect weather for a perfect wedding, the kind of day Emily probably dreamed about since she was a little girl playing bride with a pillowcase veil and a bouquet of dandelions from our backyard. I got dressed carefully, not in the champagne-colored dress that cost $3,000, not with the platinum blonde hair that made me look like a stranger. Instead, I wore a simple black dress I already owned, pulled my hair back in a neat bun, and wore my mother's pearl earrings, the ones that David had given me on our 10th anniversary. I looked like myself. For the first time in months, I looked like Margaret Chen. I arrived at the venue at 3 p.m., an hour before the ceremony. The hotel was spectacular, all soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers and elaborate flower arrangements that probably cost more than my car. Guests were already beginning to gather, women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos, everyone radiating that particular confidence that comes from never having worried about money. I found my seat, third row, aisle seat. A good view of the ceremony, but far enough back to be easily overlooked. Perfect. The wedding coordinator, a harried woman with a clipboard and a headset, was rushing around managing last-minute details. I watched her for a moment, then approached. "Excuse me, I'm Margaret Chen, Emily's mother. I have something that needs to be delivered to the bride immediately." I handed her a sealed envelope with Emily's name on it. "Is this a card? We have a gift table set up, and it's more important than a card," I said firmly. "She needs to read it before the ceremony starts. It's time sensitive." The coordinator, probably used to demanding mothers of the bride, nodded and hurried off toward the bridal suite. Then I sat down and waited. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 4 p.m. At 3:45, guests were being seated. At 3:50, the string quartet began playing soft classical music. At 3:55, Harrison's groomsmen began taking their positions at the altar. At 3:58, there was a commotion from the direction of the bridal suite, raised voices. Emily's voice, specifically, rising in pitch and volume. At 4 o'clock, when the processional should have begun, it didn't. At 4:05, the wedding coordinator appeared, looking pale and stressed. She whispered to the officiant, who frowned and nodded. Then she approached Harrison's mother, who was seated in the front row, looking like she'd just bitten into something sour. At 4:10, Emily herself burst through the doors at the back of the ceremony space. She was still in her robe, her hair half done, her makeup streaked with tears. She marched down the aisle, not the delicate, measured walk that she'd been practicing with her wedding planner, but an angry, purposeful stride.
She spotted me immediately. "You," she hissed, and suddenly every eye in the room was on us. "What the hell did you do?" I stood up, calm and steady. "I did exactly what you asked me to do, Emily. I attended your wedding as a guest and made sure it was unforgettable. The contract. You can't do this." "Actually, I can. As Janet Morrison explained very clearly in the letter I sent you, I have every legal right to call in my loans. All $33,400 of them." A ripple of shock went through the assembled guests. Harrison's mother audibly gasped. Emily's face was white with fury and panic. You're calling in your loans? Now? On my wedding day?" "I gave you 3 years to pay me back for your semester in Paris. You never made a single payment. I gave you financial support for your New York apartment with the understanding that you'd pay me back when you were established in your career. That was 5 years ago. You're making 6 figures, Emily. You could have paid me back. You chose not to." "That was a gift. You said it was to help me." "And I did help you. I helped you and supported you and sacrificed for you and loved you. And you thanked me by telling me I was too embarrassing to have a role in your wedding, by making me get a makeover like I was some kind of shameful project, by telling your friends I was the host family's guest instead of your mother." The gasps were louder now. I could see Harrison's mother whispering furiously to her husband. I could see wedding guests exchanging shocked looks, pulling out their phones to capture the drama. Emily was shaking. "Mom, please, we can talk about this after." "No," I said simply. "Pals, we can't. Because according to the loan documents that Janet Morrison helped me draft when I first gave you that money, documents you signed, by the way, I have the right to demand immediate repayment. And if you can't pay, I have the right to claim equivalent assets." "I don't have $33,000 in cash. You know that." "No," I agreed, coldly. "But you do have a wedding that cost $50,000. Or rather, your future mother-in-law does. And I've had some very interesting conversations with the venue management about debt collection and contract law." Constance Whitmore rose from her seat like an avenging angel. "This is absurd. You can't hijack someone's wedding to collect a debt. This is extortion." I turned to face her for the first time. "It's not extortion, Mrs. Whitmore. It's accounting. Your future daughter-in-law owes me $33,400. She has refused to pay it back despite having the means to do so. She has also treated me with profound disrespect, dismissed my sacrifices, and told me I was too embarrassing to have a role in her wedding. By making me get a makeover, like I was some kind of shameful project, by telling her friends I was the host family's guest instead of your mother." The gasps were louder now. I could see Harrison's mother making frantic contacts, probably to lawyers or security or both. The wedding guests were in chaos, some recording on their phones, others whispering frantically, a few actually walking out. The wedding coordinator looked like she wanted to cry. The string quartet had stopped playing. The officiant had disappeared. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Emily." I said, my voice carrying in the shocked silence. I'm here to give you a choice. You can pay me back the money you owe me. I'll accept a check right now. Or a payment plan that will formalize with Janet Morrison. You can apologize to the people you've hurt and dismissed. You can acknowledge that you've treated the people who loved you like they were disposable. Or, I continued, you can go ahead with your wedding as planned. Your perfect $50,000 wedding to a man whose family apparently thinks money and status matter more than character and kindness. You can marry into a family that encouraged you to exclude your own mother from your ceremony. You can have your magazine feature and your society photographers and your 200 carefully curated guests. But if you make that choice, Emily, you do it without me. Not just at the wedding, in your life. Because I'm done making myself smaller so you can feel bigger. I'm done apologizing for being an embarrassment to you. I'm done being treated like an obligation instead of a person who loves you. The silence that followed was absolute. Emily stood frozen in the aisle, her face streaked with tears, her perfect wedding day shattered around her. I don't... You don't have to decide right now, I said. Take your time. Think about what matters to you. Think about who you want to be. I picked up my purse and walked toward the exit. Mrs. Patterson and the others fell in step beside me. As we passed Harrison's mother, she grabbed my arm. "You've destroyed everything," she hissed. I looked at her hand on my arm until she released it. "No, Mrs. Whitmore. I've just stopped participating in my own erasure. There's a difference." We left the ceremony space and walked out into the perfect afternoon. Behind us, I could hear chaos erupting, voices raised in argument, wedding guests demanding explanations, Emily's sobs echoing through the hotel lobby. We drove to a little restaurant on the waterfront, the kind of place Emily would have called too touristy, and ordered clam chowder and lobster rolls. We toasted with cheap white wine and laughed about the looks on the faces of the society guests. "You really did it," Mrs. Patterson said, squeezing my hand. "You actually stood up to her." "I should have done it years ago," I admitted. "Maybe," Mrs. Kowalski said, "but you did it when it mattered. That's what counts." My phone buzzed constantly throughout the meal. Text messages from Emily, voicemails from Harrison. Eventually, I turned it off. Whatever happened next could wait. We were finishing dessert when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway of the restaurant. Emily, still in her wedding robe, her elaborate hairstyle falling apart, her eyes red and swollen. She spotted us and walked to our table. The restaurant fell silent, everyone recognizing the drama they were witnessing. "Mom," she said, and her voice was small and broken. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't speak immediately. I let her stand there, vulnerable and exposed, the way she'd made me feel for months. "What are you sorry for, Emily?" "For everything. For treating you like you weren't important. For making you change who you were. For being ashamed of you when you're the best person I know. For forgetting that everything I have, everything I am, is because you sacrificed everything to give me opportunities." Tears were streaming down her face, and this time I could see they were real, not performative or manipulative, genuinely, devastatingly real. "I don't know who I've become," she whispered. "I don't even like the person I see in the mirror anymore. I was so focused on impressing Harrison's family, on being good enough for his world, that I forgot where I came from. I forgot the people who actually matter." "The wedding's off," she said. "Harrison and we're taking a break. His mother's furious. Half the guests have left. The photographer's threatening to sue. It's a disaster." "Then why are you here? Why aren't you trying to salvage it?" Emily looked at me with something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Honesty, clarity, humility. because I realized something when you walked out of that ceremony. You were willing to lose me to teach me something important. And I almost let you go because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I was throwing away. I'd rather have you than any of it. The wedding, the status, the magazine feature, none of it matters if it costs me my mom. Mrs. Patterson made a small sound beside me. Mr. Kowalski cleared his throat gruffly. I stood up and faced my daughter. If I forgive you right now, if I tell you everything's okay, you won't learn anything. You'll think crying and apologizing fixes everything. It doesn't. Emily nodded, tears dripping off her chin. I know.
You owe these people apologies too, I said, gesturing to the friends around the table. Real ones. Not because I'm making you, but because you genuinely hurt them. I know, she whispered. And you owe me $33,400. We're going to set up a payment plan. $200 a month until it's paid off. Not because I need the money, but because you need to understand that actions have consequences, and debts, financial and emotional, must be repaid. I'll pay it all. Every cent. I'll get a second job if I have to. I studied my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who'd lost her way but might have found it again. One more thing. Anything. You're going to go back to that hotel. You're going to thank every single person who came to celebrate with you, even though there's nothing to celebrate today. You're going to apologize to the vendors whose time was wasted. And you're going to have a very serious conversation with Harrison about who you are and what you value. Because if you marry him, you need to make sure it's for the right reasons. Emily nodded, trying to compose herself. And then, I said, feeling my own tears finally starting to fall. And then you come home, back to the house you thought was embarrassing and the town you thought was provincial. And we figure out how to rebuild our relationship. If you're willing to do the work. I'm willing, Mom. I promise I'm willing. I opened my arms and Emily collapsed into them, sobbing like she hadn't sobbed since she was a little girl. I held my daughter and felt something that had been broken begin very tentatively to heal. Behind us, I heard Mrs. Patterson sniffling. Mrs. Kowalski was openly crying into her napkin. Our waitress, who'd been watching the whole scene, brought over a box of tissues. Sweetie, Mrs. Patterson said to Emily, when you're done hugging your mother, you've got some apologizing to do. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes, and nodded. I know, and I will. I promise I will. The aftermath of the wedding that wasn't became something of a local legend. The story spread through our town first. The librarian who'd crashed her daughter's society wedding to demand respect. And then it went wider. Someone had posted video to social media and it went viral within hours. Mother confronts daughter at wedding racked up millions of views. I got interview requests from morning shows, podcasts, and magazines. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame or validation from strangers. It was about teaching my daughter something she needed to learn. Emily did come home 3 days after the wedding. She moved her things out of the apartment Harrison had been helping her pay for and back into her childhood bedroom. She looked small and lost, but she also looked determined. I broke off with Harrison, she told me the first morning, sitting at our kitchen table, the one with the outdated Formica counters. Not forever, maybe, but until I figure out who I am without his family's influence, without the pressure to be someone I'm not. How'd he take it? Better than his mother did. She laughed. Constance actually tried to threaten legal action. Can you imagine? She wanted to sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress or some nonsense.
Let her try, I said calmly. Janet Morrison is ready. Emily helped herself to coffee from the old Mr. Coffee machine that Harrison's mother would have found appalling. I went back to the hotel like you said. I apologized to everyone. Most people were kind, actually. A few told me I got what I deserved, which, fair. Over the next weeks, Emily slowly began the work of rebuilding her relationships. She called Mrs. Patterson and spent an afternoon helping her catalog donations at the library. She visited Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski and helped them with their garden. She wrote letters, actual handwritten letters, to her high school teacher and her dance instructor and the bookstore owner. She also started therapy. She said she needed to figure out why she became that person, why she thought money and status mattered more than the people who loved her. We all lose our way sometimes, I said. What matters is finding it again. She took a job at a local nonprofit that paid less than half what she'd made in New York, but gave her, she said, a sense of purpose she'd been missing. She lived at home for 6 months, paying rent and helping with housework, learning to be part of a household again instead of just a visitor passing through. Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt trust. It wasn't easy. There were arguments and setbacks, days when Emily slipped back into defensiveness or entitlement. Days when I questioned whether I'd done the right thing by confronting her so publicly. But there were also moments of genuine connection, cooking dinner together in our old kitchen, watching movies on our worn couch, talking late into the night about David, about Emily's childhood, about who we both wanted to become.
Harrison reached out after about 3 months. He wanted to see Emily, to talk about their relationship. I stayed out of it. This was her decision to make. They met for coffee several times, then dinner. Eventually, they started dating again, but on different terms. Emily was clear that she wouldn't marry into a family that expected her to erase her own history. Harrison was apologetic about his mother's behavior and said he was working on setting better boundaries with his family. Whether it would work out between them, I didn't know. But Emily was approaching the relationship as herself now, not as some manufactured version of who she thought she needed to be. The payment plan started on schedule, $200 a month, transferred electronically on the first of every month. Emily never missed a payment. Each one felt like a small step toward accountability, toward understanding that love and support come with responsibilities. The story didn't have a neat ending, because life rarely does. Emily didn't transform overnight into a perfect daughter. I didn't transform into a perfect mother, not that I had ever been one to begin with. We were both just people, flawed and complicated, trying to do better. But I learned something important that day at the wedding, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that being a mother doesn't require being a doormat, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. And Emily learned, I think, that the people who love you when you have nothing are more valuable than the people who only appreciate you when you're successful. That home isn't embarrassing. It's where you learned who you are. That appearances and status are hollow substitutes for genuine connection and respect. A year after the wedding, Emily called me from her apartment in the city. She'd moved back to New York, but to a more modest place in Brooklyn, working remotely for the nonprofit and rebuilding her life on her own terms. "Mom, I've been thinking about something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "If Harrison and I ever do get married, I want it to be different. Small. Just family and real friends. In our backyard, maybe, with Mrs. Patterson's famous potato salad and Mr. Kowalski manning the grill." "That sounds perfect." "And Mom, you'll walk me down the aisle, not as a guest,
not hidden in the third row, as my mother, the person who made me who I am, I'd be honored. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what really matters. You figured it out, I said. That's what counts. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, my old, outdated kitchen that I'd once seen through Emily's critical eyes, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect or fixed or resolved, but because I'd stood up for myself, because I demanded respect and taught my daughter that people, all people, including mothers from the suburbs with old Formica counters and silver hair, deserve to be treated with dignity.
Harrison reached out after about 3 months. He wanted to see Emily, to talk about their relationship. I stayed out of it. This was her decision to make. They met for coffee several times, then dinner. Eventually, they started dating again, but on different terms. Emily was clear that she wouldn't marry into a family that expected her to erase her own history. Harrison was apologetic about his mother's behavior and said he was working on setting better boundaries with his family. Whether it would work out between them, I didn't know. But Emily was approaching the relationship as herself now, not as some manufactured version of who she thought she needed to be. The payment plan started on schedule, $200 a month, transferred electronically on the first of every month. Emily never missed a payment. Each one felt like a small step toward accountability, toward understanding that love and support come with responsibilities. The story didn't have a neat ending, because life rarely does. Emily didn't transform overnight into a perfect daughter. I didn't transform into a perfect mother, not that I had ever been one to begin with. We were both just people, flawed and complicated, trying to do better. But I learned something important that day at the wedding, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that being a mother doesn't require being a doormat, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. And Emily learned, I think, that the people who love you when you have nothing are more valuable than the people who only appreciate you when you're successful. That home isn't embarrassing. It's where you learned who you are. That appearances and status are hollow substitutes for genuine connection and respect. A year after the wedding, Emily called me from her apartment in the city. She'd moved back to New York, but to a more modest place in Brooklyn, working remotely for the nonprofit and rebuilding her life on her own terms. Mom, I've been thinking about something. What's that, sweetheart? If Harrison and I ever do get married, I want it to be different, small, just family and real friends. In our backyard, maybe, with Mrs. Patterson's famous potato salad and Mr. Kowalski manning the grill. That sounds perfect. And Mom, you'll walk me down the aisle, not as a guest, not hidden in the third row, as my mother, the person who made me who I am. I'd be honored. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what really matters. You figured it out, I said. That's what counts. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, my old, outdated kitchen that I'd once seen through Emily's critical eyes, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect or fixed or resolved, but because I'd stood up for myself, because I demanded respect and taught my daughter that people, all people, including mothers from the suburbs with old Formica counters and silver hair, deserve to be treated with dignity.